Hi, and welcome to our latest episode. This will be episode 4, season 5 of Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. I'm Jonathan Burke, your host, here with the ever-present Jason Robba. Jason, how are you this morning?
Doing pretty good, Jonathan. Thanks for having me back on the show. Just enjoying cranking out these podcasts. It's been really cool that we're getting in 2 or 3 of these a week, and really looking forward to this and some other things that we got in the works.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and people are gotten a lot of feedback that people are really looking forward to them. And this one is going to be about a couple different subjects: dopamine, the second dynamic, and you. And this is something I touched on. You may or may not remember. It was in a podcast with Andy Nolch back in 2017. And I mentioned about dopamine. Now, dopamine was something that was not part of on LRH's, Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology and Dianetics, on his radar as far as drugs go. So I'm gonna try and back this up, and we can kind of bounce it back and forth and everything to try and make our way across the river on the rocks that aren't too slippery and wet. Basically, the carbon-oxygen engine, known as lovingly in Scientology, as Hubbard calls it, a meat body. Hubbard says that the definition of a silly optimist is a person who thinks that they will feel good every day in a meat body. And that was the second to the last episode. We talked about showing a person how they aren't their body and that they are exterior to the body. It's sort of like a puppeteer is controlling a body. And this can be proven through various means in Scientology, but that goes outside of the scope of the podcast. What is in the scope of the podcast is that this body operates off of a rewards system in order to drive the body. Even I mean, you could even say the body could be inhabited by like what I call the local yokels, your Cro-Magnon man, caveman, and that sort of thing, and where it's more animal than it is a spiritual being driving a body. They're 3 separate things, and Hubbard calls this the composite case.
Right.
You know, this is multiple levels to that composite case as well. But what we're looking at is the being and the being with the body, just in general. So the body gets driven by different chemicals for different things. So, but the problem is that drugs re-stimulate a person's case or reactive mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the big issue that we run into with dopamine, serotonin, all this stuff. So I'd like to read, unless there's something you want to add to this or any thoughts you have on this. I'd like to read a little bit from Hubbard's bulletin of 21 December 1980. This is from the Scientology Drug Rundown. All right. Ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. And I'm going to start from the theory section, which is the second paragraph, because the other is more so an introductory paragraph. He says, it's very important to handle the effects of drugs, medicine, and alcohol on a case. In the 60s, drug use became widespread in the culture, and it was then that I discovered the need to audit out drugs as the first action on pre-clears. I'm going to stop right there for a minute, because one of the things that Hubbard ran into, and this is really, really, really key about what we're going to talk about in the second portion of today's podcast, second dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Hubbard noticed that around about 1956, 1957, things were starting to take a turn down, both in education and the well-being of people, as far as the drug culture was starting to surface. And so what was happening from 1950 into the 70s especially was Scientology its technology was raising up at a rapid pace, but the society itself was trending down. because of the drug culture, because of the change in education from, the powers that be trying to dumb everybody down into being obedient workers, et cetera, and so forth. So this is when he started to look at this, because drugs stall a case from getting gains from Dianetics and Scientology. So he says drugs make it difficult to get stable auditing gains. In fact, a drug history makes one a resistive case in many instances until the drugs are handled. This requires both an objective and subjective handling, meaning both in the physical universe to bring the person up to present time so that they can get auditing and they're not off in some far off land re-stimulated by the drugs that are left in their system. That's what the purification rundown is for, is to push those drugs out with vitamins, and the niacin especially pushes the drugs out of the body through sweating it out and through exercise. He says these rundowns work wonders when done correctly. Normally, the subjective handling consists of newer Dianetics drug rundown, which is the Dianetic version. And I have to make another point here. There's three different areas that we handle drugs in Dianetics and Scientology. One is the Scientology drug rundown, which is what I'm reading from here. The second one is the new era Dianetics drug rundown, which approaches drugs from an engrammic, that is a traumatic event, or a secondary, or a lock. Those are the three types of incidents in Dianetics. And it handles drugs from those aspects. The Scientology drug rundown is the first and the most gentle of them, where it takes you address a particular drug or all of the drugs, but you address one drug at a time, and you address these drugs from the standpoint of keying the drugs out. So what you're trying to do is that what happens is a drug takes a person's reactive mind and re-stimulates it. That's a key in. Okay, now what does this have to do with dopamine and all this? We'll get to that in just a minute. It keys the person in. That is to say that an engram has brought in mental mass towards the person. If you've ever drank, when you get drunk, you feel like you're keyed out. Okay. Now there's OT level reasons for this, and there's lower level Scientology reasons for this as well. And so what you're doing is you're keying the person out. But what happens is when that key out leaves, what do you normally get after you get drunk? Get a hangover. The mass moves back in. That is a key in. So this is very important, and it's fun and easy and educating to say that when you do drugs, you're keying the person out. Why do people do drugs? Why do they? You tell me.
Yeah, they do it to escape. I mean, that's the common thread that you get from everyone. Everybody likes that, or the little bit of removal of inhibitions, which again is a key out.
Right. They call alcohol the what is it? The social lubricant.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
No,
because you're. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I got reminded of something one of my PCs said about it, and I told him I'm gonna keep this one and use it sometime. And he said with regard to this, with the key out factor, it's like alcohol looks like it's giving you $5, but in reality it's taking 15. And he said that to me. I'm like, I'm going to keep that. Can I have that and quote you?
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Right. And that's exactly what it is it has the apparency of a positive, but it is actually in the end a negative. And that's what drugs do, is they key you out. Alcohol and drugs, tobacco too, dopamine too. We'll get to that. And wait for it, sugar causes huge rushes of dopamine. Now, wait a minute. We're going to go a little bit further here. Now, we're not going to get all holistic and natural and everything and put beads on and go out and lay in a hammock and get all supernatural. But carbs turn into sugars in the body. Okay. But we'll get to that. So the whole thing is that you're keying yourself out temporarily, only to key yourself in more and more so. The more drugs you do, the more mass you pull in. What do you get when you get a hangover? You get a headache. That is the mass moving back in. Now that's not to say that if you drink top shelf liquors, for example, like if you're having Grey Goose or you're having Cuervo 1500 or something like that, you may not get a hangover, because what a hangover is go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, but I was going to say too. Well, you explain that, and I'll do my thing after that.
Okay. The primary reason for a hangover is because of the distillation process. When something has been distilled 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you're removing all of the impurities, and the impurities are what cause part of the hangover. Now, that's not to say that you still won't be pulling in mass, but we're just giving a surface example of what it's like for that mass to move back in. That is why we use Scientology and Dianetics to handle these drugs, because they are engramic. I mean, what are the byproducts of alcohol and drugs? What happens to the person? Bad things. Okay. And this has everything to do with why these are a bad idea. But like you say, the ultimate reason for this is it's an escape. LRH says that alcohol, flat out, it's a forgetter. It gets a person to forget things. It keys out these significances in a person's reactive mind in their case. Go ahead. Now, what did you want to say?
Oh, I was going to say with regard to the hangover, there's something that Timothy and I affectionately call hangxiety, which is, in my opinion, 100% case related. It's when you talked about, like, if we are doing a chemical key out through alcohol, so we've keyed out, all that mass, when it comes back in, or when we come back in through that mass, that's that anxiety that one feels after drinking, especially after having drank so much. There's the physiological hangover with the headache and all of that, and the problems with eating. But then there's that anxiety that comes with after having drank so much. That's like a kind of a dreading feeling, is the best way I can put it. And to me, that's
right.
Going straight through those masses again. They are there, And for me, I found that like that doesn't occur usually right after the morning after drinking. That might happen 48 hours out, where that mass that I left. It's like leaving the house, so to speak, and there's the front yard and the gate, and there's, all the stuff there around the gate, and you walk out from the house and all that stuff isn't there, but then eventually you got to come back home. You got to come back to the body, and you walk
right. You made dinner, left the dishes, went out to a movie, and then came back there like, oh God, I got to do the dishes now.
Exactly.
Worst feeling in the world. I got to clean up my mess that I didn't handle when I should have.
Right.
That's literally, like, as you just said, that's literally what it is now you got to clean up the mess that you created. And so in our society, what we're dealing with is we're dealing with, day by day, it almost seems, people are dealing with stressors.
Mm-hmm.
And stress is, per LRH Hubbard, stress is you being a potential trouble source. Okay, that is really what is at the bottom. Well, it's at the mid tier of all of this. We got into that in an earlier podcast as to what the echelon is of what a potential trouble source is and what causes it. But when a person is under stress, they're looking for relief. They're trying to get away from the masses that have moved in. So they do drugs. They take alcohol. It lubricates them and keys out whatever's going on. But the thing is, and this is where dopamine comes in, and we'll get back to the reference here in a second, is they're trying to get a release. That's what drugs do. And dopamine is a precursor. That's where, when you think about it and you get that little rush, yeah, that's the dopamine.
Don't have to do the dishes.
Yeah. I mean, and it can come in any form. And dopamine is every drug is a restimulator. Dopamine is no different. And so when you're living in a world that has symbols everywhere, you're gonna have restimulation. I mean, the advertising adage of sex sells. The pretty girl on the billboard gets a person to look, or on Facebook or whatever. It's the same thing. And then the powers that be, these Zuckerbergs and well, I guess you could put a lot of names with it, but let's just use websites instead. when you're getting approval and you're getting validation, like let's say, what do you get on Facebook for? What's the primary reason back in the day? Less so probably now for you and I, but back in the day, what drove you to get on Facebook?
Yeah, a lot of people are there for the likes and the interactions with their posts.
Right. Which is what the feeling that is provided from that is
a dopamine hit.
Dopamine hit.
Yep. Instagram more than, or the other, the other one. Are we saying names of them or not?
Yeah. You know, it could be Instagram. It could be Telegram. It could be Facebook Instant Messenger. It could be Twitter. You know, I mean, pardon my coarseness here, but it's whatever gets the person off. You know, I mean, if somebody's looking forward to a pay-per-view MMA cage match, they get it, you know, yeah, or watch somebody get beat up, yeah. They're getting dopamine. Okay, porn, they're getting dopamine. They're looking for some sort of a push from the body, and this is something that LRH was talking about in this reference. He says, let's see here if I can get to the point.
I'm always looking for that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. That's fine.
I was I'll read. While you're looking for that, we use the going out to the movies and leaving the dishes behind in the sink. Just to clarify for everybody, that's what we're dealing with when we're doing the Scientology drug rundown and the different drug rundowns. Is, could you say that we're going back and dealing with all the dishes in the sink? We're doing our dishes. We're cleaning everything up that got left behind, that we've released ourselves from. All those masses that are there are the dirty dishes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you're going back and you're doing the dishes or putting them in the dishwasher, and if you're very fastidious and tidy like myself, you're going to clean the sink up, because the sink is a dish too. You know, if you drop some chicken in the sink and you're cutting chicken up or something over the sink to keep things clean, if you have a clean sink and you know, I mean, not that you should, but I mean, a clean sink is a clean life, so to speak. So you got to clean the dishes, and you got to clean the sink, and you got to clean your utensils, and have clean rags, and have a bleach bucket and all that stuff. So it's, you know, there's multiple levels on that. But the whole point is that if you leave the dishes, you need to clean the dishes up. And this is what happens with people, is they do drugs and they drink for ages, and this develops mass, and it develops ridges where this mass piles up around a person. You ever seen a person who's on drugs, and you look at them and they look like Pigpen from the Peanuts cartoons, right? You see all this machinery and blackness around them, and when I say that, you perceive it more than you do see it, but sometimes you see it. I mean, they have dark circles under their eyes. They're gaunt. I mean, you know, and we've all seen the results of something like methamphetamine and you know, the suppression that they're suppressing the body. The drugs are suppressing the body, and they can't stop, because they're looking for that next high, that next ever higher push of dopamine, just like you see with heroin and you know, I mean, you know, bath salts and you know, the latest one is this horse drug. I don't know if you've seen this. No.
Oh my God. These people, I mean, it is stunning. These people are walking around like zombies. I don't even know how they're able to stand up, but they're just standing there, and they look like something from The Walking Dead.
Oh,
and it's an epidemic in the United States right now.
No.
Now, I'm going to go over a couple definitions here, and this is why this is important. And this can be done with dopamine as well. Once you educate the person, like we're doing this on a wholesale level. Anybody that wants to listen to this podcast will have a much better understanding of what it does.
Is this where you want to define? I was going to say, are you going to define masses and ridges? Because I was thinking that was one thing we could definitely clear up.
Well, masses and ridges. A mass is is what a mental mass is, something that you can perceive. If you get upset and you feel heavy, when you're upset, that's mental mass. You get griefy and you're sad, and you have what's called an ARC break, which is a lessening of affinity, reality, communication, and or understanding, the ARC triangle, and you're griefy, that's mental mass as well. you're depressed and you don't want to do anything, you don't want to get up, that's mental mass as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is part of the reactive mind. This mass gets turned on. It gets mocked up by the person. The more they dwell on it, the more they think about it, the more stimulation they get, the more it's created by them and the reactive mind. So what happens is these masses build up on each other and they create ridges in the person's space, on their body, in their universe. And these ridges can manifest not only objectively, they can manifest subjectively. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but ridges stall things. They stop things from happening. You find yourself stopping from doing something that you know you should doing. There's a ridge there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually run these. They're actually identifiable on the e-meter, right? Which shows these ridges as charge on the meter. And you can blow these ridges. It's called ridge running. We do this.
Yep.
And it can help you. And in a way, when you're handling drugs on a person, you are running ridges.
Yeah.
In a way. But what we're doing here is we're gonna define a couple of these things here. The next definitions are, okay, what a release is when the pre-clear, this is the person being audited, disconnects from the reactive mind or bank. This is a release. When you take a thetan or a spirit out of a mass, that is a release. That's what happens. It happens at the end of audit. This is not the same as getting rid of the mass, which is called erasure. So in Scientology, what we're doing is we're keying the mass out. Okay, because it's a gradient approach. That's why there's 3 different places: Scientology, New Era Dianetics, and then on New OT4, where you handle it with NED for OTs on the upper levels. So there are many releases which normally occur in auditing. The classification, gradation, and awareness chart displayed in any organization explains these in detail. But so what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a release on drugs. Mm-hmm. And we get other kinds of releases on communication, ARC breaks, overts and withholds, change, being right and being wrong, service facsimiles, recall. This is all part of Scientology auditing. Now, next definition, rehab or rehabilitation. And we Scientologists, independent Scientologists as well, like to shorten everything and abbreviate it and make acronyms. So I'll try and clear them up as best I can. Stop me if I miss one.
Good.
When the person was originally released, let's say in this case from a drug, he had become aware of something that caused the reactive mind to destimulate at that point or become weak. That's when the person goes, wow, I feel a lot better. Cool. This is a release. Now, the difference between a release and an erasure is a release isn't permanent. Okay, it's just keyed out. Right. You're griefy, you're sad, somebody talks to you, they have take you in session, they clear that up. It's a release, or it's a release of that charge. That doesn't mean it's gone forever, but it's a much better state than it was. The mass has moved out or the mass has moved in. In this case, it's moved out. He says when the sudden point of awareness, right, and when the sudden point of awareness is again found, the release state can be regained or rehabilitated. The procedure of regaining a former release state is called a rehab. Now, the neat thing in Scientology is that if a person has gone release or has something keyed out, you can go back and you can get them to spot when that was, what happened, where it was, what was said, and they'll remember it. And when they do, like magic, it's keyed out again. You have rehabilitated that past success, win, release, whatever. A release is a big series of key outs. Mm-hmm. A key out is just part of a release.
And we define key out for people who are not Scientologists.
Yeah. A key out, again, is when a person has a particular mass or area of charge that could or would affect them. And then let's say you're feeling crappy one day and I say to the person, well, tell you what, why don't you go out and do a locational, go for a walk, look at things near and far away, have somebody else do it with you and ask them to point things out to you. And they'll acknowledge you when they say, take a look at that tree. And you go, okay, I see that tree. Okay. He says, thank you. And he says, well, take a look at that bird over there on the shore. Okay. Yeah, I see that. Very good. All right. Now you just keep doing that with the person. What you're doing is you're bringing them to present time with a locational. And a locational is a form of keying a person out of a mass. It's a Dianetic term from 1950. So what you're doing is you're getting the person to come up out of that mass and into present time, because a key in is when they have a particular incident or incidents, a chain of incidents, that the mass has moved back in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's a key in.
Right.
So there's two. The mass moving in is a key in. The mass moving out is a key out. Now, the difference between those two is erasure, is when you have gotten rid of the mass altogether. And the person looks at this situation, finds the untruth or lie in it, and then all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. And then you get the postulate, the decision. Decision and postulate are pretty much the same thing. Person goes, oh, I'm the one that decided I was going to have a wreck.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Dianetics works, right? Okay.
And I was going to say, with the etymology for folks, that we are using old analog computer tech terms, right? When we're talking about a key in, like literally taking, like he uses the calculator.
1950s computer terms, yeah.
Where you're literally punching the keys in on like on a keyboard and typing in, like if we're using, he called it an adding machine. If you're adding 5 plus 5 together, but you've got that extra mass there of a 7 that's stuck down on that keyboard. So there's that held down 7. So every time you do something, there's an extra 7 added into that equation, and you type in 5 plus 5, and you get you get
17.
Right, you get 17 instead of
17.
Right,
right.
That held down key.
Right. It's an illogic, and this particular type of thought is what led Hubbard to creating the data series as well, because you'll see these illogical 17 answers come out when you're running an organization. In your own life, you'll do these weird things. Mm-hmm. And part of this, these illogics, is drug use, porn use. I mean, you come up with solutions to a problem that become a further problem. Yep. Because you didn't have an answer for them.
Right. Like we talked about, we left, we cooked dinner and we left the house and went and did something else rather than cleaning up the mess that's left behind. And the solution, leaving the house, whatever that leaving the house is, whether it's, you're saying porn or drugs or alcohol, adrenaline, whatever it happens to be, adrenaline sports, whatever it happens to be.
Right. So that's the thing is, there are other ways to go about this. We'll get to that in a little bit, but it's leaving the dishes and everything on the table and just going out and not handling that particular cycle of action, which is start, change, and stop in Scientology. Because when you don't complete cycles of action, they hang your attention up and you get stuck there. Now, we'll address this some more in our podcast on Friday about how Scientology can help you in life. But start, change, and stop has everything to do with key ins, key outs, drug use, porn, all of this, because you're hanging your attention up on stimulators. And you've got something in your life, a stress in your life you're trying to forget about, and you go to something else to get you to forget about it or make you feel good, albeit temporarily. Mm-hmm. Now, the unfortunate thing is that dopamine is the omnipresent drug that, guess what? You don't have to go to the pharmacy or your local drug dealer to get. Why? Because your body produces it wholesale. Mm-hmm. Because originally it was created, as far as, and it's not just in us, it's in animals as well. It is for lack of a better expression, the reward system. It's what drives the meat body to do things. Because if you didn't have, we'll be really blunt here. Let's say at the end of sex, you didn't have an orgasm as the end phenomena of the sex act. Who'd do it?
Right. Yeah, there would be no more meat bodies around.
Who'd do it?
Right.
Yeah. Right. So what do you do with a dog when you want to train them?
Give them a reward.
You train them to do something and you give them a reward. Mm-hmm. It's the same system. Now, when you start looking at it from that standpoint, you start to feel a little degraded about yourself as a thetan in a body. You go, wait, I'm like a dog? Yeah, because that's not you. But the thing is you're the being tied to this body, okay? And you can train it one way, or you can train it another. And the thing is that ultimately your responsibility lies in how you train that dog that you're tied to, because that dog gets you around playing the physical universe game here on planet Earth.
Right.
And it's a huge liability if you don't train it right, or, there's a whole lot that goes into it. So to get back to this reference so we can end cycle on this, he says, some years ago, I made the discovery that drugs can give a person the sensation of releasing from the bank. That's the key out we were talking about, while pulling in mass on the person at the same time. It's a double-edged sword. This is one of the factors which makes drugs as deadly as they are. When such quote-unquote chemical releases are located in rehab, the person becomes unstuck from the mass pulled in during the drug or alcohol or dopamine trip that a person gets on. It says one of the oldest methods of processing we have in Dianetics and Scientology is the recall process. It's been the mainstay of auditing techniques since 1951. It has a new application on the Scientology drug rundown. So this is the whole thing, is it can be handled. Something can be done about it.
Yeah.
And drugs are whether we like it or not, drugs are what drive the reward system in the limbic system of a human body. Now, I am not one of these people. We've talked about this a couple times. I'm not brain, this, brain chemicals, that, brain. What I am trying to say is I don't agree with that viewpoint, because what you see on this planet is you see an awful lot of this. They want you to think you're a meat body. They don't want you to think that you're a spiritual being, which will lead to our later in the podcast about the second dynamic and what's going on there. They want you to think that you're a meat body and there isn't much that you can do about it, and you need to come to us for the answers and for the drugs.
Right.
This is the unfortunate nature of the planet that we live on. And if it wasn't bad enough, you have all the drugs you need in your system as it is in a meat body. And you probably don't even need as much of that, because it can be taken to the extreme, the ne plus ultra, very quickly in a push button society. Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to say 70 years ago, machines didn't do everything for you. And the reward system was a lot more stabilized. It was a lot more flatlined, where you worked hard, you got a reward. That's the way that it should be. Now it's open up your phone, enter in your password, and there's a plethora of bad rewards that build up. Mm-hmm. And you get more and more and more of these. And so your tolerance for dopamine is heightened to the point to where you're numb on things that in the past would have excited you and given you a reward. So it's sort of like you're the dog, and you get to the point to where you eat half of the doggy biscuits thing, and that's your reward. There's an unlimited supply of doggy biscuits, but the thing is you don't feel good about half of them. You want the whole container, and the next thing you want 6. Well, guess what? Push button society, it's there.
Yeah.
Porn up, it's there. MMA cage matches, it's there. Facebook, it's there. And the thing is it's so easy to get this stuff that you end up becoming a slave to the system. And when I say it's a push button society, they're pushing your button.
Mm-hmm. Keeping people identified as a meat body rather than as a spiritual being.
Right. And so that's the point, is this is something that these guys know on this planet, and they're using against us. Now, the interesting side rail to this is and this is something we've been paying a lot of attention to here at home, and it is really an epidemic. And I've noticed this because the difference between South Africa and the United States is one big difference. There aren't a lot of fat people. Then you're going to go, what did he just say? Well, the point is that if you look at the American diet and you look at what people are being fed, if you look at the list of the ingredients in it, in any grocery store in the United States, they can be inches long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was literally talking about this before the show.
Yeah. They can be inches long. You look at the ingredients on a package here in South Africa, they're a third to a quarter or less.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, it's the same thing here as it is there, but the difference in the United States is when it comes to sugars in the U.S., guess what? And these have been banned in multiple countries throughout the world and not the U.S., is they're using HFCs, high fructose corn syrup, because it's cheaper and it's much, much more worse on the system, the human body. Right. So when I was a kid in the 70s, it was incredibly rare to see an overweight human being. Incredibly rare. When you saw one, I mean, if you want to even go back further, there was the fat lady at the circus.
Mm-hmm.
It was a sideshow act because it was such an odd thing to see in at the turn of the century, the 21st century. You just didn't see it. But as the food supply has been more and more and more altered and corrupted, and not to mention GMOs and everything like that, but just with sugars and the amount of carbohydrates in foods because they're cheap. I mean, give you an example that's not human. What do they feed cattle? They feed them corn. Okay, it fattens the cow up.
Mm-hmm.
Cows cannot fully digest corn.
Right.
Did you know that?
Yep.
Cows are supposed to eat grass and wild plants and everything like that. That's why grass-fed beef tastes so much better and is so much better for you. But when you get these cattle that eat corn, you're eating something. You're eating a frankenfood.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, what's happened here is not only do you get problems with the dopamine, you get the problems with the high fructose corn syrup, the sugars. Here we have sugar. They don't even. I've never seen a package with high fructose corn syrup on it in South Africa. It doesn't exist here unless somebody brings it on a plane with them.
They do.
So what happens is people are eating sugar at a mad rate, and they're eating empty carbs. And so they've become addicted to these things. These are drugs, dopamine and sugar, because all sugar does is it throws huge amounts of dopamine into the system. This is a drug. And when this drug gets into your system, guess what? It pulls in mass. It keys in mass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just like any other drug. Same with alcohol. I mean, alcohols have carbohydrates in them, and that turns into sugars, and that harms your liver. It keys in masses for the body, so on and so forth. So that's why it is so important to isolate what it is that you're eating.
Right.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's like you used that analogy with me once, like there's the body normally for the pleasure system, for the reward system, for survival, does a dopamine trickle, whatever that thing is, there's a trickle of it. But then, we're getting showered in dopamine now with all the high fructose corn syrup here in the United States, free porn, all this stuff. It's like the immediate, like not one doggy biscuit, they're giving you a bucket of doggy biscuits. Right.
Where you used to get one doggy treat, you're getting 3 buckets before 10 a.m.
Yep. And then we get you, and all the doggy biscuits come at a price of mental mass.
Right. Right. And that's what Fifth Avenue, which is the street where all of the advertisers are on in New York City, in Manhattan. That's what Fifth Avenue is doing, is they're using the Pavlovian concept of stimulate the dog, ring the bell, the dog salivates, all that stuff. This is literally what is happening to people at this very moment. The billions of people that are staring like so many zombies at their phone. I mean, literally, we have a zombification of the population of planet Earth by Fifth Avenue and the powers that be in order to direct your attention. You know, we could get into it, and we talked about it on an earlier podcast. You know, Facebook listens to your conversation no matter what anybody says. It's a fact. You can prove it. You can talk about anything, and then you'll have ads on your phone in Facebook and on other apps to push your buttons, give you a doggy biscuit of dopamine. Oh, I need to buy that new workout machine. Look at these great prices. This is the planet we live on. And this is something that Hubbard was talking about. So it's very important to look at the fact that it's not only that drugs, alcohol, and over-the-counter and street drugs have to be handled with the person, but you folks are being manipulated at every possible turn. When you're sitting at that stoplight and you see a billboard, or you look at your phone, or on the side of a car, you know, these wraps that they put on cars and stuff like that, and they put a beautiful girl on the side of it. She's in a bikini and all this stuff. You're being manipulated, and your reactive mind, your case is being pushed in a particular direction to key out a mass that gives you dopamine, that gets you to do what they want if they repeat it often enough.
Right.
But this is something you need to be aware of and be wary of. Now, I'm not saying that you should go live on a mountaintop and become a monk.
Right.
Though living on a mountaintop and getting fresh air and being outside is going to give you that cortisol feeling of it's going to balance things out. And the best thing that you can do is shut off the TV, shut off the phone, read a good Scientology or Dianetics book, get some information, apply it to your life, get some fresh air, get some sunlight, and get away from the constant stimulators that society is presenting to you by the millisecond.
Right. That's right.
This is what has to happen.
Yeah. And
so, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then we with the title of this podcast, the second dynamic, there's so many things in there that aberrate and mess up marriages and relationships with, you know, we're talking about Pornhub and everything. We get unrealistic expectations of what sex and, romantic relationships are supposed to be. And those, the dopamine fed or the dopamine fueled responses from the free porn and from all the aberration you can find out there about sex through TV and the weird kind of relationships they want you to get into based off of Netflix shows. The basic reward system of having a normal second dynamic with someone, again, is the trickle of dopamine where, you know, guys would rather have the shower of dopamine from, you know, a couple of minutes of free porn.
Right. And it's the same way from anything, because the access is part of the problem. Is you have access to with a phone. Yep. The stimulator is a symbol. What is a symbol? Well, in today's modern society, a symbol is a video on YouTube, a video on Pornhub. It's an image. An image is a picture. A picture restimulates you and pushes a button. Mm-hmm. And what happens is a person gets so much of something like heroin. Okay, it's akin to the same phenomena that every time you take heroin, the hit that you take isn't as and what it delivers you isn't as good as the last time. So you have to get more and more and more and more, and then that doesn't do it. And then you start getting into BDSM and freakier stuff, and you just go down a rabbit hole of aberration. And the people that are producing this stuff are in the same bind you are.
Right. Like we've got all these movies and stuff coming out now about some of the crazy stuff that's going on at the very top with these elites, and it's like there's case in point right there. These people.
That is worst case scenario. Yes. When you get into the pedophilia and all of that, and that is that's as bad as, well, it probably could get worse, but that's almost as bad as it can get on the second dynamic. Now, the sad thing is, and this is where we'll kind of do a segue over to this, is these same individuals are driving the direction of the second dynamic on this planet. Okay, so you've got the drug, the dopamine as a driver for drug use, porn use, alcohol use. Smoking is well, at least in the U.S., is, for whatever reason, has been curtailed, which I'm really, really surprised on. But in other places on the planet, kids are smoking at 5.
Vaping, yep.
Yeah, and in the Far East and stuff like that, it's an epidemic. So this leads us into, and this was the part that you wanted to talk about as far as the second dynamic goes.
We'll just define for people that
head there.
What the second dynamic is. We've got there's the 8 dynamics in Scientology, which are the 8 urges toward survival. So we've got the first dynamic being the self dynamic, the individual in survival as an individual with a body, and then the second dynamic that we're talking about here is the sexual dynamic or the family dynamic, right?
Yeah, your significant other, your parents, your siblings, all part of the second dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Procreation,
and taking care of that which procreates.
Right. Yep.
Along that line, that's the second dynamic. So here you've got these guys who are pedophiles. The World Health Organization, Klaus Schwab, and Clintons, and you could just go on, and Hollywood. I mean, it is rife, Pizzagate, all that stuff. This is the crux of the matter, is you have people whose second dynamic has been so folded in on itself to where they have to get these huge dopamine hits in the atrocities that they're committing with these missing children.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost unbearable to think about some of these things that happen. We won't get too far into that, but these guys, it doesn't matter whether you or I believe that it's true or anything like that. The fact of the matter is that the Jeffrey Epstein thing is a little bit of a thread on the sweater as to where this whole thing led, and the list of people that went there is incredibly long, and they've been trying to distract that one away as much as possible and as hard as possible, and to try and cover up these overts. Yeah.
And that's just one place where people want to commit these overt acts.
Yeah. That's just one that let slip.
Yeah, right. It's just
sort of a thing
on the surface. Yeah.
Right. So their opinions of the second dynamic on this planet is that they need to reduce the population because the population is swelling.
Right.
In their minds. And they have the viewpoint of that survival includes the elimination of people through the thrill of eliminating them.
Mm-hmm.
They get a dopamine hit on that.
Right. By controlling others, by controlling bodies.
Yeah. And this is on the Scientology emotional tone scale. Controlling bodies is way down on the bottom of the scale.
Low def.
Way down there. But the fact of the matter is that this stuff is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And what this has to do with you is that you don't have to be a slave to this chemically oriented body system. You don't.
Right.
You don't have to have sugar. You don't have to have carbohydrates to survive. A little bit is fine, but you need to understand that things are out of control. Almost everything here in South Africa, every food product has sugar in it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you get on Google and they say, well, sugar's not a drug. Well, sugar itself may not be a drug, but that's sort of like saying that the drunk driver doesn't kill people, the alcohol does.
Right.
Right. Who was driving the car?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, they get around
So,
it. Yeah, there's ways
right.
on with definitions of things, but with the regulation of drugs within, you know, the United States and other countries, there's what is a drug technically, and they you know, don't change the words themselves, but change the definitions of them.
Yeah, they literally changed the definitions of them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, Hubbard has a tech for this as well, the study tech and everything, as far as, did the person that wrote this have the authority to say it? Right. And that's a biggie there, because just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true.
Right.
And that's really something that people have to pay attention to. Just because some Joe Blow tells you what ADHD does on TikTok doesn't make it true.
Exactly. They love that stuff. They want people to, in my opinion, and I think it's more than my opinion, they would rather have people self-diagnose to get, to pull in these masses. That seems to be like the new popular thing to do. There's a little bit of a tank with the self-diagnosis thing. That really masses for people. It scares the shit out of them. Or it gives that little bit of a dopamine hit through the victimization thing. But anyway.
Right. Yeah. And that's just like going to WebMD. But because by the time you get done being on WebMD, you're going to think you're just totally screwed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to do through these different channels. Now, I'm not trying to say that you have to be paranoid or anything like that. What I am trying to say is that with Independent Scientology and what Hubbard is saying, even though a lot of this data is 50, 60, 65, some cases 70 plus years old, it still holds true.
Right.
And that there are solutions to this insane society that we're living in, where you're looking for a dopamine hit and they're manipulating you into a certain direction that causes you to fall into their clutches on the second dynamic and do silly stuff with porn, where you lose your loved ones, you lose your wife, you lose your kids, and it can happen to anybody through sugar, through alcohol, through reading materials, through being on TikTok and listening to sources that they really shouldn't be saying anything. But people do have First Amendment rights, but it's your responsibility, your knowledge, responsibility, and control to not just take something that somebody says on the internet or TikTok or Facebook, just because you get, and this is the honest to God way this works, is you get a dopamine hit because you read some information and that information is false.
Right. There's a whole, like, it used to be just like a subclass, but there's like this whole category of fear porn addiction now too. Like, it was kind of a thing there like 10, 15 years ago, where it was like this kind of like fringe thing, but now it's like not so fringe, that there is just straight up fear porn out there, and people get their dopamine hits by, the world's ending again today, and there's YouTube channels in particular. It's a lot over on YouTube or YouTube. But there's there's a reason why they put the word porn in it, because it's like it gets that dopamine hit of like, oh yeah, it's getting bad. It's getting so bad right now.
Right. People revel in that stuff, and they revel in bad news. That's why Hubbard said, that the merchants of chaos were the news media, because they play off of that National Enquirer knee-jerk reaction of, oh, Elvis has a son with another woman. I remember seeing that stuff on a weekly basis at the grocery store when I was a kid. It was the same thing. The YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, they are all for people that remember the National Enquirer or People Magazine. I had to block People Magazine off of my iPhone because every single last story had to do with somebody who had died or some awful thing. This is people. This is what they're purveying. So it was like, listen to this bad news about, and some of this stuff was just horribly aberrated, things that had happened to people. I don't want to hear about that. Right. And that's one of the things, is that you do get dopamine, and that's a very good point that you made. Yeah. You do get dopamine because of the reactive mind. It gets restimulated by the negative, not just the pretty girl too. I mean, people love that fear porn stuff. I mean, on Facebook, for example, whenever I get on my Facebook on my phone, there's in the Reels area at the top. It's not Reels. It's the it's a little the vertical picture. Yeah. It says it has a picture of some celebrity, and at the bottom in yellow with black print, it says sad news
exposed.
Yeah, and I'm like, what the fuck is this shit?
Right.
Get it off of my. I didn't ask for this.
Right.
And it's just clickbait. That's what clickbait is. It drives into the reactive mind's negative. I want to hear about, oh, I hate this celebrity. And they're looking for this negative stuff. Negative gets dopamine just as much as positive. And that can't be overlooked when you watch the nightly news and stuff like that, because the news is controlled by this cabal that's running the planet. And they want you to feel a certain way, and they're pushing your buttons every minute of every day. Key in, key out, key in, key out, key in, key in, key in, key in. Then they provide the key out, which is the pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to understand this. And before too long, it's going to be too late. That's what the whole COVID thing was about.
Right.
Is problem, reaction, solution.
Mm-hmm.
They created the problem. They got the reaction they wanted. They posed the solution. Now they're monitoring 50% of the population or close to it with this crap that's in people's bloodstreams. And they're also eliminating portions of the society, especially the children.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's going on. And anybody that says that it isn't just doesn't want to confront this stuff. I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom about it. Neither are you. But I'm saying you can do something about it, and you can understand what a key in and a key out is, understand how dopamine works in the system, understand how they're manipulating your second dynamic through porn, through the food you eat, the sugar that you go to a food desert known as Wawa or Quick Trip or 7-Eleven on the West Coast.
Yep.
That sort of a thing where you walk in there and the only thing that's healthy in there, and it isn't even healthy, is the apples and bananas that they've sprayed and are GMO to make them look sexy to you, so you'll buy them, and they taste like shit.
Mm-hmm. And
Chemicals equal control, equals drugs, equals dopamine, equals mass being pulled in. That's the point of this podcast. And you need to wake up to it, and you need to be aware of it, and know that you're being manipulated through your own case and your own body. You are senior to your body. It's Satan, mind, body. It's not the other way around.
Right.
The body has its own influences. Your influences are your influences. Take them back.
Right. And by no means are we being trying to scare everybody or saying that everybody needs to give up sugar and everything altogether. We're not trying to be ascetic about things, but we are saying, don't allow it to control you.
Right. Yeah, and like Hubbard says, he says, if you understand something completely, you can't be at the effect of it.
Right.
And people need to look at this, because they've been so desensitized over sugars and carbs. And, the best thing you can do is be outside, eat naturally, eat healthy foods that aren't genetically modified, that haven't been sprayed with all kinds of crap. And, get in touch with the natural side, because the body will thrive. And when the body thrives, it's not dragging you down. The body drags you down as a being. And that's the thing, is you get far enough in Scientology, you start to recognize, okay, I'm letting the body push me around. I need to be taking care of the body and not pushing it around. And it needs to be a symbiotic relationship. It doesn't need to be 90-10 or 80-20. It has to be a 50-50 thing. But you're calling the shots, not somebody else pushing the body around to get you to do what it wants, because the body wants dopamine. It doesn't know that it creates dopamine. It just likes the effect of what it does to itself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, in closing, do you have any closing comments, thoughts, feelings, or significances before I end this podcast for today?
Yeah, this is
I sound like an auditor.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Anything to say or ask before we end this podcast? Yeah, no, I think this is really cool. This has been a good one. I think there's going to be a lot of folks who get a lot out of this. A lot of you that are coming to this podcast that have just discovered Independent Scientology. I hope you got a lot out of it. We're going to continue to be putting content out like this.
Yeah. And we're going to try and open your eyes, and we're going to try and demystify Dianetics and Scientology, independent Scientology, because the difference is independent Scientology is Scientology the subject. It's what Hubbard created and what his original intents were for the subject. It isn't this corporate entity that turns you upside down and shakes all your debit credit cards out of your pockets and everything like that. There's a lot of stuff you can use in your life. It just takes knowing about it and getting a little education on it. And then you can go from there. And if it's true for you, it's true for you, and you can do some more. That's what we're doing, is demystifying the subject of Scientology and letting people know what this data is about. Jason and I are both auditors, and we're here to help people. We're not here to take advantage of people. We're here to educate people so that they can have their lives back and be a cause. That's the point of these podcasts, and to let people know that the bad name, the bad rep that the word Scientology has doesn't come from Hubbard. It really doesn't. He wasn't perfect, but let me tell you, he's one of the best friends to mankind a person could ever have if he spent any time looking at the materials that he's created and gave freely to people to use to better their lives and the lives of others. That's our viewpoint.
Right? Yeah. Come by, go on our website, and you can book a free consultation. You can book a free Dianetics auditing session, 2 hours for free. Yep. And also, too, all these people that talk about Hubbard and Scientology, most of them have not even read a single word written by Hubbard. And
that's all hearsay.
Right. There's plenty of free courses over on the website. And if you want to learn something about Scientology, go over.
You can get it from ao-gp.org. There's a lot of valuable data there. We have all kinds of bulletins, policy letters, videos from Scientology, just all kinds of stuff on there. It's a plethora of data that you can look at, and a lot more coming real soon. So for Jason Robba and myself, Jonathan Burke, we want to thank you for listening for an hour and 20 minutes if you stuck around this long. And we'll see you on our next podcast on Wednesday, which is going to be about past lives. This will be a really fun podcast, I think, for everybody, and probably a long one if I dare say so myself, because it's such a hot topic.
Yep.
So we'll see you guys soon. Signing off. Take care, and take care of that body, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.